Wait. When do I see you again?
There's a line.
And how long is this line?
It's long, very long. But for you, I might put you in third, fifth place.
Ah, fifth.
Maybe. Why? What can you do for me?
Give me your number. We chat live and discuss it properly.
Chat live? Really? Chat live? When my Tamagotchi only makes SMSs and takes phone calls?
In this day and age.
Yes, in this day and age. Look, thanks for the food, ne? What's that? For me?
Finish.
Thank you.
Tell me, Miss Tamagotchi, which of your broke schoolboys is gonna spoil you like this?
So now you think because you got me your phone, you know, you can get my digits and skip to the front of the line?
Well, that's up to you. Look, I just want to get to know you better.
And he just like gave you all this stuff.
It's got good taste,
I mean, you need to watch out, eh? You know how Saul likes to change his wallpaper girls.
Look, I know these things don't last forever, but he's getting what he wants. I'm getting what I want.
You say that now. But you just need to wait for the right man. They say that love changes everything.
So, how many times do I have to tell you? Call me when my dad leaves. Just chill out, guy.
So is that what you're telling me?
Those are your words, not mine.
Believe in yourself, don't you ever change for anything. Rise up from the dust. The sky is hurting me.
What's when I call?
When that moment arrives, you need help from the very person you've been hiding from. Will you speak your whole truth, or will you continue to hide?
That's how we do it ourselves, boy. That's what they call it ourselves. Why don't you put out the lights, boy? Why don't you turn the lights out?
So thanks so much for this introduction, Ayanda. I really think that is a great way to start your talk so that we know who you are in this series. I think you will have to explain a little bit more about MTV Shuga. What is MTV Shuga and what was your role exactly in this TV show? I give you the floor.
Hi there, Karen, and hi there, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm actually really honored and so privileged to be part of this panel. I think, it's very important that we actually unpack mental health and where just mental health at large, women and men, especially in these times that we live in. But more than that, I'm really honored to be part of this conversation as a man, because I feel in order for us as men to start reflecting about gender equality, we need to be exposed and involved in these kind of spaces so that we can take back and go preach or speak to other men and start initiating the conversation towards a healthier and equal society. What you guys have just seen is what we call MTV Shuga, which is one of the most effective campaigns in the world that speak to behavioral change. MTV Shuga is a 360 campaign, which is a campaign for young people, done by young people, where they tell their stories about their sexual behavior. And it goes across mediums. It's a mass medium campaign. So it's a drama series, it's a radio show, it's a comic book. There's a number of peer education that happens across the globe as well. What you've just seen is a story of Soul. I happen to play the character of Soul on MTV Shuga Down South and Down South 2. This character is pretty much the spoilt brat, I'd like to say, where his father owns all of these taxis, owns a taxi fleet of taxis. And he pretty much drives the most pimped out vehicle in the neighborhood. And so all the young kids love to drive with him and they all want to be like him. And so he's in this position where, he's moneyed, but also He changes the girls that sit on shotgun of his car, and eventually he meets this girl called Tulu, and they engage in a transactional sex in a blessee kind of subculture that has developed here in South Africa and across Africa. Maybe some of you might know it as the sugar daddy and sugar mama kind of culture. And so he meets this girl, Tulu, who's way younger than him, but he soon starts spoiling her and buying her gifts and clothes and all of these things. And soon he consumes this aggression and this element of owning her and feeling like, he owns her 100%, 24/7. So I want to firstly unpack the blessee kind of scenario, just so we understand this relationship between Saul and Tulu. The difference between this culture and prostitution is that in prostitution, the woman kind of still holds the rules of how this will work out. It's simple, it's transaction, there's money. And so she has the right to then say, for my own health and my own mental health, please wear a condom. This is how long the duration will be. This is the prices, and this is what will happen. In this scenario of a blessee, the male assumes this position of power. And so this is why this culture is so much more dangerous for women, because in this space, the man immediately feels he owns her, immediately kind of places the materialistic stuff he buys her as her value in this relationship. And so when he calls, she should answer. And this is why this culture has become very unhealthy and has created such a huge wave of perpetrators that now literally lure women in and young girls in through money and materialistic products. I want to then speak about the impact that Saul ended up having amongst the people around him. Saul is the perpetrator in the scenario, right? And so the relationships he has with his mother is that of a violent nature as well, because in this nature, in this scenario, in this space, he's grown to devalue women, to feel that just because we've got the money and I pretty much control you. And this has a ripple effect to the woman around him, his mother. And so he speaks any way he wants to towards his mother, because he feels, well, mom, you are in a similar scenario. Dad has money, and so he can control you. We soon discover this in Down South 2, where we unpack Saul's backstory. And this is where it actually gets more interesting, right? We're used to seeing the story of the victim, but we need to understand the story of the perpetrator. We need to look at a solution outside of simple condemnation and just taking this perpetrator and putting him into prison. We need to understand the root cause. Aggressors can only be helped to change if we understand the cause of their violence and employ our empathy. Saul's story went on to evoke a lot of reaction to the MTV Shuga audience, because we were exposed to the root cause of why he was the way he was. We got to meet his dad, we got to meet his family, his sister, and we got to realize that in his environment, actually, this is something the father has himself. The father is this person. The father is abusive to the mother, instills this fear element in the household. And so Saul consumed this nature, and this is the only way Saul knows or feels, this is the only way he knows how to express love, or the only way he has learned this is how you treat women, right? And so we as society have condemned these perpetrators, but we don't realize that they too have a story to tell. They too are victims. And so we need to unpack that. We're not excusing them, nor are we saying anything they've done is correct, but we're saying that in order to rehabilitate them, we need to unpack the root cause. So now let's look at the impact that Saul also had in society. In season 2, we meet Kensani. If you saw in this clip recently, Kensani, the clip that I just played, Kensani is Tulu's best friend. But in season 2, Tulu, at the end of season 1, Tulu passes away due to this whole ordeal that happens with Saul. But in season 2, we get to meet a depressed Kensani, because Kensani feels that she could have done something to help her friend earlier. And this is a culture that a lot of young girls fall into. This is a mental block and a mental scenario that a lot of young girls fall into, because they start seeing their friends dating these wealthy men or married men or whatever it may be. But the friend, what we don't understand is the impact that it makes to the friend as well. The friend is there witnessing this. And when repercussions such as death or abuse, gender-based violence happens, they then blame themselves. So in essence, what I'm trying to say here is that there's a ripple effect to this perpetrator. And that is what we need to make the perpetrator understand. Those are the kind of impacts that we need to allow the perpetrator to understand, so that he too can reflect on himself and see that he's not just being selfish towards this one individual, but he's impacting the entire society. Now, why is this so important to me? Being part of MTV Shuga, it's a story that I found has been very different to other stories that I've dealt with or performed in. I believe that we all have a purpose, and this medium for me of storytelling has been my purpose. But this particular story made me realize that there's a deeper level of understanding we as humans need to pass, and we need to tell. And storytelling has a great impact. If you look at the impact that MTV Shuga has had, according to the World Bank, it is said that even the men that watch the show have halved the amount of sexual partners they have, the simultaneous sexual partners they have. The girls that watch the show are twice as likely to get tested. And so the impact that Saul's story had to society was very interesting, because a lot of people, I got sent messages, I got sent, we as MTV Shuga received numerous emails. And some of the things that stood out for me was one that said, I hate Saul, but I want to give him a hug because I want him to realize what's really underneath the layers. And this only happened once we really unpacked the perpetrator's story. People started realizing that the perpetrator also has a voice. I went from living a life of danger from the first season, where people would send me messages and, people would threaten, or people would send hate mail, to when we unpack the story, all of a sudden people wanted to engage, and people wanted to say, oh, actually, I know someone like this. I know someone who I think we really need to speak to, and who really needs to show, who really needs to watch this content. And so how this has affected me in moving forward, it has allowed me to be so proud and feel like I'm serving my purpose by engaging with men and offering safe spaces for men. And I think this is what needs to happen, is that men need to offer safe spaces for each other, for us to start initiating conversation. We as men need to start asking the next man, how are you doing? Are you okay? Is there anything you'd like to talk about? Because I feel what's happening is a lot of men are suppressing, and so taking it out in the only way they know how to, which is in a violent and aggressive manner through their masculinity. But if we as men started embracing our femininity, then I think we are at a step towards change. And by saying that we need to embrace our femininity, I'm not saying our masculinity needs to suffer. What I'm saying is we need, yes, have strength, have masculinity, but find a balance. Find that balance of being gentle. Find the balance of expressing your emotions. We need to find that balance of masculinity and femininity. And through that, we as men will start having these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayanda, for your talk and bringing in the male perspective of the talk we already had this morning and also yesterday, because it's so easy to say, the perpetrator, it's the perpetrator, but everyone has its story and everyone has its root causes of why you behave in a certain way. So thank you so much for bringing that in. I was wondering, to open up the discussion, your character as Soul. So you were the perpetrator of gender-based violence and sexual violence. Is he aware of his ill behavior and the effect it has on those around him?
I think once you get into that space, especially once you're consumed by the environment that you grew up in, or wherever you learned these toxic traits, once you're consumed in that space, you start to believe that what you're doing is right. And so, for example, when I played this character of Saul, I, for one, have never abused a woman or lifted a hand or anything of that nature. But in order to tell this story as honest as possible, I couldn't judge Saul. I had to believe what he's doing is right. And I think that's the mentality he comes from, that I am lifting my hand because I love you. I need you to understand how I'm trying to instill a level of discipline. I'm trying to instill a level of respect. And this is all from his perspective, not knowing the impact it's having on someone else. The only time that Saul started seeing this impact and started reflecting is in season 2, when he started seeing his father and started actually looking deeper into the relationship that the father has with the mother. And through seeing, and actually, spoiler alert, but through losing his mother through the relationship the father had, he then sat back and said, that's me. That's exactly who I am. And I'm probably even worse because I'm manipulating younger girls. And so I don't think he's aware of the impact. Only once these conversations can be had, can they start reflecting about the impact.
Yeah, so true. And if you don't have the consciousness of what was going on, you just act out of the autopilot, basically. You just get triggered, you do, you don't reflect, you don't think. And if someone starts to ask you questions of, why do you do that? Or what is happening to you? Why can you behave in such a way? You may start to put a seed into someone's head and think, okay, maybe this is not quite right, what I'm doing.
And definitely. And I think it starts with us men. We need to start having these conversations. Mm-hmm. We need to start asking ourselves, why are we doing this? It's so important that us as men start holding each other accountable. But not by saying, you are wrong, you did it. It's by saying, okay, let's talk. What's really happening with you?
Exactly. You know? There's a lot of compassion for it, because it's not, there is a root cause why you behave in such a way. And as you mentioned in your talk before, you get the love which you find within your parents, within your family, the way how you've been treated. That's the first entry point into love life, basically.
Yeah.
And if you
definitely.
get a wrong perception about love, how can you change it? Because you were a child, you're an adolescent. But how can you understand the concept of love if you only see violence around you, whether it's physical, verbal abuse, whatever form it takes? It takes maturity in order to look behind what is going on. Yeah.
And to step out of it. It definitely does. So with Saul's story, the mother, she gets abused. And so Saul tries to seek help for her by taking her to one of the community nurses, who tries to suggest for safe houses or whatever. But the mother retracts and says, no, I love my husband. He's just very stressed right now. He's just going through a lot, and he's really just working hard. You guys know nothing. You guys don't know him. I love him. And we'll get through this. When a child witnesses a mother do that and retract, he immediately in his head feels that, okay, if I go out there and abuse another woman, all I need to express to that woman is that I love her. And I'm doing this because I love her. And I'm sorry, babe. Sorry, I'm just really stressed right now. I'm sorry. So that she can say the same thing and defend the perpetrator. And so it's very important that as much as men need to have the conversation, it's very important that women also be part of the conversation with men. Because what's happening is a lot of women are talking to women about gender equality. That's preaching to the choir. We need to have women talking to men, men talking to women, and then that conversation can start having legs and actually being more impactful.
Yeah, yeah. Very interesting perspective. And I think in the international community, we focused a lot on women and we tend to forget the men. And this is coming more and more up in having this conversation. And we also talked a lot about gender transformative approaches where this comes in all this conversation, men and women. There is one question from the audience. As you put down, we need male role models. Do you feel there is such a discussion happening around other publicly known people in South Africa and more artists, sportsmen, etc. are willing to step forward to play that role?
That's such a heavy question because there honestly are men who are stepping forward and having these conversations. The likes of Siya Kolisi, Sivngesis, there are men who are stepping forward to have these conversations. But on the other side of the coin, there's the audience who are saying, these men are just doing this for clout? They're just trying to get following, or they're not being honest? And that's the challenge that a lot of public figures have is to say, okay, if I come out and start initiating this conversation, how do I position myself so that people can understand how authentic and honest I am being about this particular conversation? Because a lot of people tend to then try to reflect on your past mistakes that you have done as a public figure and say, but how can you be talking about this if you've done this? Not knowing that, yes, you're human, you've done mistakes, but this is part of your rehabilitation as well. This is part of you trying to move forward. We are all figuring it out. But we need to all be brave enough to say, I'm willing to figure it out in front of all of you. I'm willing to make mistakes in front of all of you so that we can create a safe space to have conversations. That's all that is needed, really, is really creating safe platforms and safe spaces for everyone to have these conversations and to open up emotionally, mentally. There's a lot that's going on in here, and there's a lot that's going on in here, and we're not getting more of this, and that's what we need.
Yeah, thank you so much. So important that we have the courage. It takes so much courage to stand up for your beliefs and to also have the courage coming out with your own story, because no one is perfect. Everyone does mistakes. And because no one is talking about it, or has difficulties talking about these taboo systems, about cultural norms and values, it takes a lot of courage because you are vulnerable. You're showing your vulnerability. And for men, I can imagine sometimes it's even more difficult because you have the masculine side of, I cannot show my vulnerability. Even though vulnerability is actually a strength if you master it and if you can really come out. And that's what's so fantastic about you and your character with Soul, and that you are now coming out and really trying to be this role model for so many other men and women in Africa. I have one more question I would like to ask you. How do we prevent creating more souls in society as a whole?
This is actually quite a very interesting question, because I'm currently on the journey of trying to get to that answer, and the angle I've looked at it is, like I said, trying to create safe spaces. We need to really try to create safe spaces for men to initiate this conversation. We need to start creating a culture as men and women, but a culture where we allow men to come through and express their femininity without feeling like their masculinity is threatened. We need to create a culture where I can give another man, a really long hug and tell him it's going to be okay without my masculinity being judged or feeling uncomfortable about my masculinity. And it begins with having these safe conversations. And it does go back to the male role models. It maybe starts with them because they've got a larger reach, the public figures. It probably starts with them. But the most important thing is we also need to start and speak to our young boys at schools, at school level, at home level, speak to our children and let them know that it's okay to come to your aunt and say, or to your mom and say, Mom, my uncle touched me in an inappropriate manner. Mom, so-and-so said this. It's okay. Mom, what's happening with my body? Why am I getting this? What's going on? Those conversations we need to start having at home. And shows like MTV Shuga are created to initiate those conversations. There's a story that happened in Cape Town of I think it was in Cape Town, of a child who wanted to initiate a conversation about sex with her grandmother, but she couldn't. And so she took the DVD of MTV Shuga and she just played it. And before she knew it, they were in deep of these conversations. And maybe that's what we need, more campaigns that are done by the youth, for the youth, so that we start initiating conversations.
Thank you so much. And on this note, I would like to mention the producer of MTV Shuga, George Arnold, who I did a podcast with, and I will send the link later on in the chat box where you can listen to the background to MTV Shuga and what it has created. And she also mentioned the positive side effects of MTV Shuga. They did a large trial on the behavior of people watching MTV Shuga. So that is absolutely fantastic. And it's really, really nice that we were able to have you here in this conversation. You brought a lot of insight to this conference, and we are coming to an end of this conference. So I would like to thank you so much for being part of it.